In this video, I want to have a look at solving factorised equations. So the piece of information that we need to know to be able to do these is that if we have an expression like a times b, and that's equal to 0, the only way that that can ever happen is if either a is equal to 0, b is equal to 0, or both. So let's have a look at some examples of how that helps us to solve equations. So in our first example, we've got x outside of x minus 2 equals 0. Now, when we write equations like this, there's actually an invisible multiplication sign in here between the x and the bracket that we don't usually bother writing down. But what that means is that in this equation, we have two things multiplied together to give us 0. So we have our x, and then we have this whole x minus 2. So to make that equation true, one of those things has to be equal to 0. So we're either going to have that x is equal to 0, or that x minus 2 is equal to 0. Now this one's giving us an answer straight away. With this chunk, we're now going to go through and solve this equation. And the way we do that is just by adding 2 to both sides. So our final answers are x equals 0 or x equals 2. And both of those numbers will make that equation correct. In our second example, we've got minus 3x outside of x plus 4 is equal to 0. So again, we've got two chunks that are multiplied together. So that means that either minus 3x is equal to 0, or x plus 4 is equal to 0, and then we can solve both of those equations. So in this one, we're going to divide both sides by that minus 3, and we'll just get x equals 0. And in this one, we'd have to subtract 4 from both sides, and we'd end up with x equals minus 4. All right, for our third example, we're going to have x minus 7, x plus 3 is equal to 0. So this time we've got two brackets, but again, there is still that multiplication sign in between them that we don't usually write down. So that means we either have to have that x minus 7, that first bracket, is equal to 0, or that x plus 3 is equal to 0, and then we can solve both of those. So we're either going to have x equals 7 or x equals minus 3. For our last example, if we have 2x minus 1, 3x plus 4 equal to 0. So we're going to start the same way we did this one. We're either going to have 2x minus 1 is equal to 0, or 3x plus 4 is equal to 0. And we are going to solve both of those equations. It's just one step harder because they're two-step equations rather than just the single step. So this one we'd add 1 to both sides. So we'd have 2x equals 1, and then divide by 2 to give us x equals a half as one of our answers. This one we're going to minus 4. So we'd have 3x equals minus 4. And then divide by 3. So we'd have minus 4 over 3, or you could write it as minus 1 1/3 if you'd wanted to. So let's have a look at how we can solve factorised equations.